Hey, what's up, y'all? My name is Dennis Heil, and I am diagnosed with type 2 bipolar disorder with severe depression and high-functioning autism. I've been living with bipolar disorder for over 30 years, 15 of which I spent undiagnosed. In 2009, I experienced a depressive psychotic break that led to my diagnosis of type 2 bipolar disorder. I would be diagnosed with autism a few years later. In my podcast, Bluntly Bipolar, I'm going to share with you my experiences and the hard lessons I've learned trying to find some peace and happiness in my life. I hope that by sharing my experiences, others can avoid learning these lessons the hard way. I'm not a mental health professional. All I am is a mental patient with a microphone. Listener discretion is advised. Anger played a pivotal role in feeding my bipolar disorder and depression, as well as complicating social and emotional matters through my high-functioning autism. In this mini-series, prefixed on anger, I will be exploring the role anger played in my mental wellness and how it was used as a weapon to manipulate me as a straight white man from a blue-collar working-class background. This is episode 13, On Anger. You're not protecting who you think you are. The traditional view of masculinity demands that a man be willing and able to do violence for the people he's supposed to protect. And if somehow you cannot live up to that standard, then you are less of a man. Of course, that perspective is not limited to just men. I've met plenty of women who would more than happily kill for their kid in defense or retaliation. But what if I told you that belief does not project strength? What if I told you that point of view enables predators and makes it easier for them to take advantage of the people you feel you absolutely must protect? So walk with me as I share with you two brief stories. The first is of my friend who I call Sarah. She completed suicide in 2025 at 46 years old. I met Sarah in high school, and we drifted on and off as friends throughout life. We reconnected again back in 2015, and we were getting to know one another again. In the course of reconnecting, I let an offensive limerick rip without thinking. That triggered her trauma from her childhood sexual abuse. She said to me, "Dennis, I need you to sit down and really listen to me." And so I did. She went on to tell me about how her sexual abuse by her uncle started on her 4th birthday. I'll spare you further details because I don't think it's necessary. Sarah carried the trauma of her experiences all her life and struggled up to the end with diagnoses including PTSD and dissociative identity disorder. But that isn't the focus here. The focus is actually her dad. Because her dad was a blue-collar dude, almost stereotypically so. He worked a variety of blue-collar construction jobs in asphalt and paving, if memory serves me correctly. He was very much the kind of guy who would do anything for his family. And unfortunately, Sarah's uncle knew this. Her uncle lived with them while her mom went to college and worked full-time. But like most predators, the uncle assumed he could manipulate Sarah into silence. Her uncle was her babysitter, alone with her for most of the week when she wasn't in school. He manipulated her into silence by telling her that if she told anyone about what they were doing, that it would break up her family. Her daddy would go to prison for a long time, and her mommy would be mad at her. And so Sarah was silent until she was 7 years old. At 7, she tried to tell her mom what was happening to her. And her mother called her a liar, beat her, and told her if anything did happen, then she must have done something to deserve it. And so Sarah was silent until she was about 13 years old. At 13, he took her out into the woods to do what he was going to do. After he was done, she told him if he ever touched her again, she'd go straight to the police. And in response, he shot himself. Her mother, of course, was heartbroken because she loved her baby brother so much. So she blamed Sarah for his suicide. And Sarah carried that weight on her shoulders until she took her life. Sarah was fiercely intelligent and had wanted to be a doctor, but she was never mentally stable enough to make it through school. She loved Jurassic Park and Garfield the cat, And I have to wonder if I could have done more for her or did something different that would have changed that outcome, but I don't think so. We reached a point where I felt like I couldn't stay around her once she got blackout drunk and punched me in the face. I tried to convince her to get sober, but she was so tired of dealing with doctors in the system, particularly since DID is such a heavily stigmatized mental illness. Some mental health professionals don't believe it's a real thing, so finding care can be hard. And all of her dad's posturing and masculinity to project strength, to project protection, meant nothing in the end. In fact, it meant less than nothing, because it enabled a decade of severe and frankly horrific child sexual abuse from the time that Sarah was a toddler to teenager. The second story is one I'm choosing to not tell fully, because it's not mine to tell and he tells it much better than I could. Instead, I want to make you aware of him and his story, because I think it's important to see and hear from someone who's lived this. And that person is Mr. Clark Fredericks. Mr. Fredericks was groomed and molested for years by Police Lieutenant Dennis Pegg, who was a close friend of the family. Pegg took advantage of Clark's trust and even had a special nickname for Clark to call him. One day, many years later, the two crossed paths again in public. And when they did, Pegg was with another boy that was about the same age as Clark when his abuse started. Pegg tried to greet Clark, but Clark froze, his brain screaming at him that he was in danger and he needed to flee. Clark bolted out of the store to get away from Pegg, and on the way out, Clark heard the boy asking Pegg who he was, and he called Pegg by that special nickname. And that sounds like a whole lot of ugly things came flooding out of Clark's memories. Not long after, Clark ran into a friend who encouraged him to go confront Pegg. And that's what he did. And Clark ended up killing Dennis Pegg. Clark was arrested, pled guilty to manslaughter, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. By the time this happened, Pegg had been active for years. The first complaints against Pegg happened almost 40 years before he was killed. But as an officer told Clark, they never had the evidence or witnesses to get a conviction. The unfortunate truth is that none of that had to happen. Because when the rumors started going around that Pegg was molesting Clark's friends, Clark's dad asked him on 2 different occasions if Pegg ever touched him. And from what I can gather, his dad was associated with a criminal motorcycle club and was the kind of guy that would make Pegg disappear. But Clark was old enough to understand what his dad might do and what the repercussions of that choice would be. Though his dad was seemingly okay with those circumstances, can you imagine being a young teenager trying to decide between asking your dad for help, which may cause him to do something that lands him in prison for a long time, or shouldering the abuse in silence? Clark decided he couldn't put his dad in harm's way, so he denied everything. And Clark spent decades carrying that trauma and burden with him until he would eventually end Dennis Pegg's life. Prosecutor Gregory Mueller stated that complaints against Pegg dated back almost 40 years. Clark was 50 when he killed Pegg, and Pegg has 4 confirmed victims, and his computer is found to have child sexual assault material on it. Officials believe that with his pattern of behavior, it's extremely likely that there are many more victims as well. Now, imagine if Clark's father had created an environment of safety where Clark could have been honest. Imagine if Clark's father had put that same kind of energy into supporting Clark through reporting and advocating for him. Imagine if Clark's father put that same kind of warrior mentality into pushing for Dennis Pegg to be held accountable. Instead, the child had to shoulder the responsibility of the consequences of what his father might do to Pegg. Imagine if Clark could have said, "Yes, Dad, he did rape me. Please help me, Dad." Neither Sarah nor Clark's fathers were able to protect them at all, because they projected protection and safety through the lens that we are socially conditioned to. Other men who aren't predators will typically respect that and think, okay, he's not someone to fuck with. But predators? Predators don't think that way. They tend to think they're smarter than everyone else and won't get caught. They see that posturing as a blind spot to exploit, a vulnerability to exert control over the victim. As I deconstructed my anger and examined what I thought it meant to be a man in our society, I was faced with an ugly truth. That perspective and willingness to do violence wouldn't protect anyone. The only thing it would protect is my pride and ego, while simultaneously enabling abuse if such a person were around me. I was forced to ask, am I a safe person? And I realized I'm not. Well, I realized I wasn't. I had to ask myself, am I man enough to set down my pride and ego? So what is more important, my willingness to appear tough to the rest of the world, mostly to other men, or be able to provide real safety and protection by being in control of myself? And so I ask you, are you the type of person who would do anything for the people you love? Anything at all? Are you willing to entertain the idea that your perspective might be wrong? Are you tough enough to say to the people that matter most to you, hey, if you ever came to me for help, I promise I won't do anything stupid? Are you tough enough to sit down with your loved ones tonight and ask them, hey, if someone hurt you, would you feel comfortable telling me? Or would you be more afraid of my response? If the people you love have to wonder what you might do if you found out the truth, then you're not protecting them. You're protecting their predator. Thank you for spending your time with me. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share this with someone you think needs to hear it.